45 days using the ZDO Plus Excellence. I've had a hands-on video on it so far, but I've never had the opportunity yet to make a full review. And so this is what we're going to be doing today. Going over the things that I haven't talked about in my original video, which, by the way, if you haven't seen, make sure to bookmark it. I'll put it in the description because there's a lot of things that I covered there. I don't want to overlap things and take more of your time than necessary. Now, this was sent by GadgetHyper, which is probably the best place where you could buy one if you're interested in getting one for yourself. And of course, there's going to be a link in the description. Pretty much anyone that bought from them only have good things to say, but they're not the ones making this controller. A company called ZD from China are the ones making this controller. GadgetHyper is a storefront that specializes in controllers. So if you're a controller head like me and you haven't heard about GadgetHyper, well, you definitely need to bookmark that website. ZDO Plus Excellence. And it's going to be important to know because you may have never heard of this company, but they do have other controllers on the market. So if you just look for ZD controllers, you're going to find a lot of different options. This is really the O Plus Excellence. And something we heavily covered in the previous video is that it is an incredibly modular controller. And this is a special edition, but regardless of if you take a special edition or not, you'll have a lot of different modules that you can use. You have different style of buttons, different style of D-pads. I don't have all the different modules rather than going over all of them because that would probably be a different video on its own. I'll go over what you can do as a concept and why this controller is basically one of one. You can swap your left and D-pad, right? So if you'd rather have asymmetrical where you have your sticks both where my thumbs are, you could do that. Or you can have an asymmetrical setup. The D-pad is probably one of the very few buttons on the front that will never change. Now, the placement can change as we just addressed, but it's always going to be a micro switch, and it is an extremely satisfying one. One thing you'll be able to do is change with different caps that you can put on top. This cap, which I love, and something we'll use during the video. You have your regular cross style, you have another type of dish, and you even have this weird looking, almost like an analog stick. And by the way, this that I just mentioned a second ago is designed to go with one of your different various stick caps. So you can use it kind of like a mini stick for fighters. It's pretty cool. Now, same goes for the sticks. You're also gonna have a bunch of different options. For example, you have the mushroom cap from PlayStation, or you also have different heights. Some of them that are ludicrously high, for example this one, but to me, I mean, I don't know if anyone is playing with this for aiming. To me, that is for when you want to pair it with this and have like again a mini stick kind of solution for your fighting games. Something you can do. I have not seen that anywhere, so that's another way that the ZDO Plus Excellence stands out. What you need to know is you can make a lot of different setups. D-pad is always going to be micro switch. When talking about your sticks, you have options from ALPS, Hall Effect, TMR, and as I understand it, they are still coming out with new modules, which is going to be a super important thing for the future, the legacy of this controller, but we'll get back on that. And when it comes to the face buttons, you have, your conductive membrane style is going to be like more silent. You're also going to have a micro switch option, which is not what I have installed at the moment. You also have an optical, which will use a laser to understand your actuation, and they feel amazing. This is what I have installed at the time being, but again, this is an option that you can buy separate parts and make it as you see fit. When looking at your face button, they're all pretty much tactile except your home button here that is membrane, but the rest is tactile. You have a 3.5mm jack at the bottom, so on supported hardware, it's going to work for rerouting your audio. You have your shoulder buttons. Oh, look, I mean, I'm going to have a sound test, but they sound amazing. You have two extra buttons up top, which are also micro. You have hair triggers for your triggers. They're Hall Effect, but you can also have tactile activated hair trigger mode, which for tactile, I usually prefer micro switches. They actually feel quite good as a tactile button. So that's something that is very beneficial. Here you're going to have a pairing button. You're going to have a gyro activation, deactivation button, and something to open up your RGB. You have your dock prong if you want to get the dock to have something to sit it on, which, by the way, the dock can serve as a hub also, which is kind of cool. Here you have a USB-C, a USB-A, and two more USB-As off to the side. And then, of of course you have your connection, connect the dongle. All of a sudden, my controller is connected with my PC using the dock. And if I wanted to introduce more things, I could, because again, this is a hub. This is such a nice touch. Swiss knife, keyword. I haven't said it, but Swiss knife, this is going to come back. You also have 4 extra buttons. So you have your paddles, which you can install like so. And that's another benefit that this controller has as a whole. I mean, it's not common that we see paddles Xbox Elite style. Usually most paddles that we see are buttons. Another one that I can think of are goalie kick controllers, especially driven for FPS. You don't really have much better than this paddle alignment. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you still have the 2 up top. So that's a total of 6 extra buttons. Another thing that, of course, not exclusive to this controller, but is also not very common. And also, if I didn't mention it, those faceplates, they're removable. So for example, this is another faceplate that goes with it, and that shows the other alignment. You're using your USB-C to connect up top, slightly recessed, but I like that it's a good cove. So for example, the cable I use usually with my PC is quite large, but I like it because it's such a flexible cable. It'll fit just fine. But in most controllers that I have that have a recessed cove, it doesn't. So that's a nice touch of putting some space in. Ergonomics, you're extremely close to an Xbox style. And I mean, this is kind of what we have here. If you were to put it symmetrical, it's going to change a little bit. Like, it's going to become one of those controllers that you hold with the middle of your palm a little bit more if you were to go like this. But if you hold it like this, it kind of releases the tension in the middle of your palm. So it's very much Xbox-like. The one big difference is if you're going to rely on these 2 buttons here, you kind of have to go over your shoulders and triggers, and you hold it like this where it kind of, what I like to call, it makes the eyebrow shape. You can hit every button, but it's definitely going to make it harder to be efficient with all 3. If I was playing an FPS, for example, and I'm using this controller, I'd much rather just not rely on those, except of course, if you go claw, then that would be different. If you go claw, it's a beautiful setup because you essentially can control these 2 buttons with your middle finger, and then you'd have your ring finger to take care of the trigger. And then of course your, I don't know what you guys call it in English, this finger, but you know, to cover up your face buttons. So depending on the kind of setup that you're trying to use, it's definitely designed for claw. Like, it's great for claw, and the fact that you have exactly the same height makes it so easy to operate with just that finger and keep the trigger finger, we'll call it, well, at least in the case of a controller, because otherwise it would be this one. You know what? I don't even know why I'm talking about all these things right now. Swiss knife, right? Like, the options are pretty much infinite. Like, you'll make this controller what you want it to be. And it doesn't get more literal than that. There's other things that you can do. It has rumble. You also have gyro, which we'll look into a little later. You do have an app, and the app is available on iOS and Android. It's not on app stores yet, so you have to go to their website to download it. To put it in English, all you have to do is click the top right corner here, and you click English, and there you go. Then you can just back out, and you're on the English mode. You'll still find a lot of Chinese in there, which is absolutely fine. It's something you may not be using. For example, if you were trying to buy, if you click here, you'll notice that we still have Chinese and the different models. You know, quite interesting, maybe to help discover the brand. This is always something you can take a screenshot for and put into Google Translate. Just know that it's a feature that exists. But if we're talking really just navigating the app to find and operate your controller and tweak it to your liking, that's how you're going to do this. You're going to first switch the device. Make sure that you selected the ZD-O Plus Excellence, which is this one. And then you just go ahead and scan. And usually the first time you get all these prompts, if it allows you to check for the device, you just accept it. And once you see your controller, you're going to be able to connect. Sometimes I get this little prompt that it didn't connect. Just do it 2-3 times and it should do fine. And once you're in, you can just click on the controller right here. And then you have a bunch of different things that you can do. Now you can save profiles, right? So if you want to have profiles to not have to redo your settings, you can do that. Right now it's connected to my PC. As say for example, between games, I want to change my profiles, you could totally have your app as an assistant. And for the record, they're also working on a Windows app to come. When looking at button mapping, you can pretty much change anything. When talking about the layout, right now I'm using like an Xbox layout, A, B, X, Y, but you could also have layouts that are, Nintendo, B, A, Y, X. So that's a thing that you can buy also for yourself. Regardless of the layout that you're using, you can change their values, and you can also put keyboard and mouse value. I don't know if we have all the keys. Yeah, we seem to pretty much have all the keys. We have turbo for each of your buttons that you can activate. Now then, when looking at triggers, you can address the dead zone both for your left and right trigger independently. You can tune your joystick. So we have invert X-axis, Y-axis. You can swap with your left D-pad. Left D-pad swap, right D-pad swap, both joystick. You can address the sensitivity curve. You have your gyro here. You can map to left joystick, right joystick. You can have different types of activations. These will affect the different types of axes that are being read to retranslate to your right stick or left stick, depending on what you want. You can address which key activates and deactivate the gyro. And another thing that is nice here is that you can use one of those extra keys. You can address the vibration. In this controller, you have vibration in the grips, but you also have vibration in your triggers. It's gonna read like an Xbox controller that has vibration on your trigger, so you're gonna get the impulse trigger mode. But if you're playing games that don't have native support for impulse trigger, which that's the unfortunate part, it's a super cool feature, but it's also a feature that is not heavily supported, much like the DualSense haptics or adaptive triggers. So if you want to have these triggers shaken pretty much every time that you play, this is something you can do with the app by activating stereo vibe. Or you can also have the trigger pulse, which is going to be kind of a modular adaptive trigger, which means that the further you push, the more it'll vibrate. I just realized though, as I was testing it, I think they made a mistake. Usually trigger pulse should be the one that makes it so that the further you push down, the more it, oh no, okay, progressive vibration based, okay. It's like the description matches, but the name, I feel like it should be backwards, but you know what, it's fine. So here, the further I push it, the more it vibrates. Here, what it's gonna do is whenever there's a sensation that will vibrate the grip, it'll vibrate the triggers at the same time. And this will keep them independent based off of the game if it supports impulse trigger. Now lighting, this is something I purposely deactivated. You have a bunch of different things that you can do here. Of course, you can toggle them on and off, and you'll have different modes: static, breathing, gradient, and flow. Flow is definitely going to be my favorite, because flow, what it does is you have multiple RGB. To the eye, by the way, it doesn't look as bright. That's just the way the camera perceives it. But essentially, you have various RGBs across. But if you wanted to have something, for example, gradient, it's going to keep the same color across the board, but it's going to change consistently. And so everything I just did for the face buttons, you can also do for your left joystick and your right joystick, and they don't have to match. You'll notice that I now have a steady blue, steady pink, and I have the flow effect on my D-pad. You can customize it the way that you see fit. You can close them, you can have them all vibrate and pulse it at the same time. You can have them match, you can have them be independent. That's up to you. So this is a nice customization that we have here, and a nice touch as well for your RGB. You can make macros. So you have macros that you can associate to each of the extra keys. And then when making macros themselves, you have a bunch of different options. And one thing that is cool is the macro includes the mouse and keyboard touch, and you can address the timings if you want. Disconnect, I mean, sure, you can. You can also test it. Now, it does say that when you test it, because it's using a different connection type, you might see delays. As you can see, it kind of feels as if it's laggy. Don't worry, that does not represent the speed of the controller. That's just the app behavior, and that's why we get a warning at the beginning. I believe they probably had an idea that people were going to be like, yo, what is this? So that's absolutely normal. If you click on product, and you'll see that right now we only have English for the ZDO Plus Excellence, but if you click on English, you'll know, if you click on English, you'll notice that you have your manual on how to do things such as like boot specific modes or recalibrate your controller. Everything is there. So if you do get it, just know that it's all available in the app and you can have all the options you may need. And so this is the app in a nutshell. As you can see, we have a lot of different options in there. You shouldn't really be missing for anything more. Let's jump into the testing portion of the controller. Stick tremor, you can observe a little bit on axis 2. There is no axis snapping at all. So funny enough, the module I'm using on the right does have stick snapping, but the module I'm using on the left does not. So it's gonna depend on the module, I guess. The circularity test goes slightly over, at least with this module, and slightly over on the other module. In the app, you don't have an option between raw or circle, so this is what we have to work with. So when looking at inner dead zone, we essentially have no dead zone. When looking at the gap dead zone, if you pay attention, for example, to axis 1, you'll see that it jumps from 0 to 0.004, a really good stick. Now this is, I'm pretty sure this is the all effect module, whereas this is the TMR module, and it's just a little bit more sensitive, but we have exactly the same jump in terms of step points. Looking at outer dead zone, you have just a little bit on the Hall effect module, so little that I would just consider this to not have any. On the TMR module, however, you have just a little bit more, but again, it's nothing alarming, nothing to be worried about. The Hall effect module sits at 40 TGF, quite low. TMR module has a 70 TGF tension, so we don't necessarily have the same tension per sticks. Unfortunately, I don't have other module to test them all, but yeah, just keep in mind that this is something that may differ from one module to another, the tension. I mean, we've established that already, but just to be sure, I'm going to test it on the app. And yes, we are at 0.0039 step jump resolution. Overall good. We've seen better, we've seen worse. This is what we have here. Looking at diagonal focus. Fairly easy. Now the great thing with this controller is that you have so many options in terms of the D-pad that this is something that, depending on what kind of module you use, you might very well be able to address. For example, if I was to switch to this solution right here, it's pretty much guaranteed that I'll always hit diagonals. So my point is, while I will test like I normally would, the flexibility that you have with D-pad style, which is pretty much bigger than any other controller I've seen on the market, that will help a great deal at achieving exactly what you want to achieve as far as the rolling test. This style of D-pad, oh my god, it's so good for rolling. It's so amazing because you know you have that very straight line. You essentially cannot miss your rolling test on this one. I'm curious to see how it's going to translate in Street Fighter, but it feels amazing. Now, as far as adjacent direction, this is something that is achievable with this D-pad module, but also if you were to change, some might do better than others. Like if I'm intentionally going to the edges and it's still not happening, or very little of it. I mean, it's not to say that it's impossible, but it's so unlikely just because of, again, all the options that you have. In terms of the D-pad center pivot, it's very simple. You essentially have none. What I feel here, I wouldn't consider to be, like, there is something happening, but I wouldn't consider that to be a pivot. It seems more like the module just having a little bit of flex. So I wouldn't consider that a pivot. That said, could you utilize that as one? Yes, in a way, but you just wouldn't feel that to have a center pivot, at least not what I would consider one. But back to center pivot, you can just easily work from the center. That's no problem at all. And then of course, depending on the module that you use, and I know I'm repeating myself at this point, but you know, it'll greatly help or deter depending on what you're trying to achieve or the type of game that you're playing. Yeah, there was a dead zone in the app, so my bad. Now that I remove it, you still have, like, yeah, it's so little that I would essentially consider that you don't have any. The linearity seems very, very good. Way not as aggressive as what I usually see. So this is really good. I think this is going to be amazing for racing. Jeez, okay, I'm impressed. Now, as far as the end of the actuation, you also have very, very little play. Yeah, I'd consider that no dead zone at all on the triggers. Wow, very, very good. Dampening. yes, you do have it. You do have a little bit of it, but it's very well executed. I'm not a big fan of dampening. I like a little bit of it because, you know, it does help in terms of noise, but this is not too aggressive. Like, you know, sometimes you have so much dampening that you can keep pushing super deep. That is not the case here. Like, I'm pushing very hard just to get a little bit of flex. So very well executed there as well. Hair trigger, you do have one. It is tactile, but like I said earlier, it's a very pleasant tactile, one that could almost fool you in thinking it is micro. And the reason for that is that we have just a little bit of travel distance like a micro switch would have. So it feels very close to being one, even though it's not. It is very much a tactile module. It just feels really, really good, quite satisfying. Great for shooters, by the way. I tested it a whole lot. Feels good. This is just as good as it gets. On average, between many controllers, this is on average a good score that I have here, but I've done better. One thing to be said is I do feel like I need to spend more time practicing, and while I have played shooters in the last 45 days with this controller, I haven't focused on shooters. And if I was to practice, the thing I like with the stick is it's extremely reliable. And I'm talking about the reliability. There's just one jitter that I feel I experienced during the entire run, and I was actually surprised about that. I don't usually feel something like that when I use this stick. So overall, very happy with the result, but of course, you know, we're always going to do more runs as we always do. Now, one thing that I feel does potentially work against me in terms of just the experience that I'm having right now is the tension. And I'm using the TMR, which I believe to be the best module. So if you have the Hall effect one, it's actually quite good. The TMR is better in my opinion. That said, the tension might give you an edge with the Hall effect. And, you know, that's something that I don't necessarily mind that it's a higher tension, but because the stick is such a good quality, I feel like we could have had like a 55 TGF, and so having something lighter on your thumb that requires a little bit more control, but ultimately allows you to be a little bit faster as well, which I think that's something I would have benefited here. Now, my issue is not so much being precise, my issue is being fast enough between my dots that I'm shooting, and that is something I feel like a lower tension would have helped on average. But that's what I mean by I need more time. The controllers that I've been using more for shooting have slightly lower TGF, so it might just be an adjustment thing. Like, it takes a minute. If I was to get back into this controller full time, that's probably something that over a week of playing, I would eventually just adapt to it. You know, I'm trying to dare a little bit more, but I don't want to dare so much that I'm making mistakes here. So I'm trying to be like strategical. But already you can see that my score is improving once I try to go a little bit faster. Yeah, so great potential with these sticks. When it comes to gyro, the problem with this controller, it's actually, in terms of responsiveness and reliability, I think it's a great option. The problem is I wish it would let you control more axes or give you a little more control over the axes. So for example, this is the car mode, and you can essentially do the, I believe that's yaw to do left and right, and you can do tilt to do up and down, and it'll always work from your controller being still, like being flat essentially. So for example, if I put it upwards as you would most likely hold it, you'll notice that it no longer like it keeps pushing up. I go from car to fire. Now that is meant more for aiming essentially. I think what they mean by fire is aiming, and for this one it works really nice. Like, I can see myself using that. The problem is that you have roll to do left and right, and for aiming, in my personal opinion, that just does not make sense. So if you're to hold the controller like this, that means that if you want to go right, you're gonna tilt the controller like that. If I was playing a racing game, I think like that would make sense, you know, because you're kind of like steering it like a steering wheel. But if it comes down to aiming, for me personally, I find that pushing the yaw back and forward is how I would want to control my camera. This is an option that does not exist outside of the car option, and when you do that, it's just not usable in my personal opinion. But you know, this is something that could easily be addressed. They would only have to redirect the yaw axis to the x-axis of your right stick, give us the options to do that. So as long as they keep upgrading the software to give us alternatives, I feel like this is a gyro that could be really good. In the meantime, what I am able to do is to use it to control only up and down. So this can be a little confusing. Personally, I find I have a little bit of a hard time, but I know some people do that. If you do that, you're going to be happy with what is already there. So essentially your stick would only be for left and right, and you would use up and down to control the y-axis of your right stick. This is just something that personally I have a hard time like wrapping my head around. I struggle a bit. But it's a thing. That's probably the most important thing to have, is how does it feel? It feels good. It feels responsive. It doesn't feel to have dead zones that are too aggressive. But by the way, you can address a lot of those in the app. So, even if it wasn't exactly to your liking, you could adjust it. But you could also always rely on a mode, in this case, the switch mode, and do the Steam input gyro calibration. But what is in there seems to be very good quality and work well. All right, good old Street Fighter. I mean, yeah, it's probably not the most precise, but man, is it satisfying to use. I can't explain how satisfying this module is. It's so nice. Then when using this, what I find interesting with this one is I feel like I sense the switch a bit more, and it's actually quite usable, but I'd say this one is more for feel. If you're trying to go for a specific feel and that's like what you want, especially with a taller one, I feel like it does a job that I haven't seen any other controllers do. So essentially you'd want to claw your D-pad with this module. At least that's how I find that it's the best to use. And it's quite impressive how pleasant it feels and how true to form that it does as well. That's something that I would strongly encourage fan of fighter games to experiment with. It's probably going to be very efficient for a character like Guile as well. So yes, definitely love the fact that we have so many options. This D-pad, I always talk about working your D-pad from the center. This is this D-pad, like big time. And it's such a, if you're playing long hours and you're looking for something that is comfort, but also very precise, it's so pleasant to use. It has this like different feel when you hit the cardinals versus hitting the diagonals. Honestly, that D-pad is like, the thing is, the ZD-O Plus difference does way more than just one thing when it comes to D-pads. It has so many options, and that is something that completely transforms the experience based off of where you want to go. Something, honestly, I wish would become a standard because it's so good to use, so cool. And this one is just comfort for days. Like if you are a heavy, and I mean heavy D-pad user, comfort is often, I find, the thing that ends up being an issue first before anything else. So this will take you the distance, but you're not getting there with sacrificing your inputs or your response time overall. And I don't know why I'm being this bad right now. I'm sorry for that. But yes, just an overall extremely well-balanced solution as well. Something I'd greatly recommend to anyone. And if you're looking for something, just more classic, that's another option that you have with the 4-way cross, and feels very good because it has like a little bit of a dip in the middle. Put it this way, in terms of D-pad, like this is at least I feel very comfortable in saying this is the best controller I've used ever. The options are such a pleasant thing to have, but the switches that they use are also really good. It's not a silent D-pad, however. If that's a criteria you have, you may be deceived with this one. I don't know if the microphone picks it up right now, but it's not a silent D-pad. It's not super noisy, all things considered, but it's not the most silent option that you have on the market either. I mean, the graduality is outstanding. And also, something I probably forgot to mention, it has a good tension. Like, this is another thing that it really you can feel it that it's really pushing back. So it really has a good tension as a trigger. Now, that could potentially be something for comfort that people like a little less. But as far as just, helping you dial in into the levels that you're trying to achieve, this is gonna be a really good trigger. There's so much that this controller does so well, and when it comes to racing or something that will require precision in your triggers, this one is no exception. The website rates up to 900 Hz wired. I'm not getting 900, but quite frankly, what this controller lacks in terms of pulling rate, and it's almost an insult to say that it lacks because it doesn't, but you know, there are products on the market that will do a better job when it comes to pulling rate. That said, I think everything else that it has easily outweigh the pulling rate discussion that may be had when it comes to the ZD-O Plus Excellence. And let's move towards my closing. The best place to get that controller is GadgetHyper, and GadgetHyper was very nice in sending me this product, multiple modules, the dock, everything so that I could really test. And I realize now that I've got to test everything, I probably should have been a little more greedy in my requests and say, you have to send me everything, because the reality is I just cannot go to the absolute extent of all that you can achieve, but I already have enough, that's for sure. I already have enough to tell you that this is beyond anything else that you've used. What I will recommend is that you go to their Discord, that you go on Reddit, that you find people that have multiple modules to let you know how it feels for them. I wish I was able to tell you about each and every one of them, but you know, one, that would have to be a different video, and two, if GadgetHyper wants me to do this, they know how to reach me. For the time being, I believe I have enough data to let you know to not sleep on this controller. It's a beast. It's an absolute beast. I don't know what else to say. Very few controllers leave me in awe like this one does. The build quality, like I've been using this for 45 days. It looks like it's straight out of the box. It's so freaking good. It's an amazing build quality. It's really impressive. Oh yeah, I guess I didn't mention price. The base controller is $100 USD, and depending on the modules, it can range from approximately 10 to 20 USD. But you know, you also have special edition that will bring you a couple of things to start with. So depending on what you want, you have different options on where to start. But if you want to build from scratch, the entry price point is 110 actually usually, but right now they're on sale at 100, and so you just build on top of that as time goes on. So it'll be very simple. In my opinion, the ZD-O Plus Excellence is one of the better controllers to exist on the market right now because it gives you a lot of different options. It will cost, you know, like for you to achieve exactly what you want or for you to test different options, you're going to have to spend, right? Because it's going to cost modules. Controllers that are 200, 300 on the market are actually not new, and it's not something unheard of. But if you were to spend that kind of money on a ZD-O Plus Excellence, you are getting so much more flexibility. This is really the Swiss knife of controllers, and it doesn't really get better than this. And this is something you can use on PC, iOS, Android, on Switch 1, Switch 2, on your Steam Deck. It'll just work everywhere. There is something to keep in mind though, and this is where I'm a little concerned with this product. It's groundbreaking. It's a one of one. It's so awesome, but it'll only remain as such if ZD puts serious support behind that controller. And this is where I'm concerned. I don't know ZD like that. You know, I'm not trying to say they won't, but it's cool that, you know, this exists. How often will we get updated modules? How often will we get updated bases that can support higher pulling rate or newer features? This is something that is only as good as they are willing to keep on building on it. And if they don't, essentially they don't support their customers. Now, I'm not saying that this is what will happen, but if they don't, that's what ultimately will be the outcome. And I'm truly hoping that they'll see this video and that they'll understand that for a product like this to not just be a cash grab, and I'm not saying it is because it's actually amazing as it is, but for that to really be a legacy, which I think is what ZD has the potential to do here, they have to back this product. And how do they back these products? Very simple. By keeping us up to date on what they're doing to improve on it, to bringing new modules, new options. And by module, look, if you're telling me you have the ZD-O Plus Excellence V2 base, right? And the new base supports 2000 hertz pulling rate. It has a screen on it to be able to do quick adjustments on the board. Perfect. But if I bought a module from the O Plus Excellence, it should be compatible with the new base and vice versa. And if they can do that, there's nothing quite like this controller. It has all the options you could want for. It has beautiful cases, it has faceplates, it has the ability to change modules, all the different types of modules for your face buttons and stick that you could think of. I really hope they're gonna keep supporting this product, because I keep using the word legacy because I think this is what this has the potential to be. A controller that is talked about with other amazing options on the market because it has so many legs to stand on, so many things to make it unique, flexible to what one needs. And when it comes to gaming and gamers in general, we may all love the same action that is playing games, but we don't all play the same games. We don't all play the same way. We don't all have the same goals. Some people play for fun, some people play for competitiveness. That's the kind of controller that you will be able to shape to your absolute desires. So rather than buying 6 different options because you're trying to get, a best controller for when you play FPS, a best controller for when you play fighting games, I can't think of a controller that is better at doing all of this at extremely high level. Like I said earlier, are there controllers that I think would be a little bit better for, X or Y or Z? Yes. But this, I feel comfortable in saying this is the product at this point in time that'll give you the most general capabilities at the highest tier within all those different options that it does. In other words, you are not compromising nothing. It is, I often say, you often hear on the internet, jack of all trade, master of none. No. This is a jack of all trade, master of many, just not everything. But it achieved things that I just simply haven't seen other controllers achieve. That is it, guys. That is my conclusion. You may notice that this video feels different. And, I'm still working on the studio, but I'm trying to find ways to make this work. Probably not even near being done, but hopefully you won't mind the format. And this is a format I might use for a little while until I have things figured out. I hadn't done a controller review in a minute, and I had to get back on that horse. So these are the compromises I have to make to do that. Hopefully you won't mind. Happy to be back, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.